Okay, so let's start with our lesson. Wala na tayong getting to know each other. Bisag balik taron ang world, kaila ko sa inyong tanan. So diretso ta, magklase na gyud ta. This one is the introduction for statistics. So for this morning, we will be identifying the categories of statistics and we will set out a system for describing different types of data. So actually, this is not really a pharmacy na subject, no? Pharmacy na major subject. But this is just in preparation for your research. So basig na tingala mo, ikaw lagi ang teacher, mama. kay syempre, di ba, pharma man jud ko, pero since I am also in charge sa inyong research, so I also need to teach you how are we going to analyze and interpret the results of our research. Okay? So, this is my my third this is my second year. Yeah, this is my third time na nag-teach ng statistics. Okay, so let's define first what statistics is. This is, I told you a while ago, a branch of mathematics. So you expect a lot of numbers and computations. Now, what is the focus of statistics? We are dealing here with first the collection of our numerical data. After collecting them, especially in research, after tayo, for example, mag-conduct ng experiment or gather ng results ng survey natin, we will be organizing these numbers. We will arrange them in such a way na mapapresent natin siya ng maayos and understandable. But we have to do analysis also and interpretation. So these are all under statistics hanggang interpretation until we can make inferences or conclusions. So that is the target talaga of statistics. After gathering all data, we have to arrive to a certain conclusion or decision about our data. Again, that is statistics for you. I will provide you everything, the recorded discussion, the copy of my PowerPoint presentation, yung present ko kanina, how to download the just, ibibigay ko yun sa inyo after the class. But you can still take down notes, especially sa mga things na hindi ko nilagay sa aking PowerPoint. Kasi mahilig ba ako na, especially sa mga next subjects nato na as you move on sa mga levels. Pag ma-teacher ko ninyo, dili tanan naa sa ako ang slide man good. So you really have to take note. Next, let's talk about the different activities that we are going to do sa statistics. We have here collection of data. So again, everything starts with the collection of data. This is where we gather our data through the following method. So any of this method, we can do interview. I don't know if you have done that in your research sa inyong high school years, but meron tayong tinatawag na qualitative research where we conduct interview, or if you have your questionnaire and then you just distribute your questionnaire to your target respondents. And then, syempre kung nag-answer na sila, we will be collecting their answers. Now sa pharmacy, most of our studies are actually experimental. Therefore, we do experiments. After doing the experiments, we can actually gather numerical data. Aside from that, we can also do observation and we can also do documentary analysis. So these are all methods on gathering numerical data. Now, after collecting our data, the next activity for statistics is to present our data. So again, presentation of data, meaning we are going to arrange our data in a specific manner where our reader or our audience can easily understand these numbers. So we can use tables, or we can use graphs or other method of presentation. So again, pwedeng tables, pwedeng graphical presentations like bar, graphs, mga frequency polygon, pie graphs, and many others. But anyway, I will teach you also, meron pa rin tayong separate discussion on the presentation of our data. Iisa-isahin ko lang muna yung activities na gagawin natin for statistics. Next, after presenting our data, syempre we have to do analysis. So, kailangan natin mag-analyze. Anong ginagawa during the analysis? We will be describing our data in terms of the properties, the characteristics, or even the behavior of our data. Or we can actually identify here the possible relationship of our variables. Because in research, most of the time, hindi lang naman isa yung data natin. Most of the time, marami sila. Therefore, if we do analysis, we will be describing each of them, and at the same time, we can analyze na hahanapin natin kung meron bang relationship itong set of data na ito doon sa another set of data natin. That's the so-called analysis of data. Now, after doing the analysis, we can also do interpretation of our data. So this is where we try to explain the meanings or the meaning of our findings, the meaning of our statistical or numerical data. Now, after giving the meaning, this is where we decide or we give decision or we make conclusions and inferences. Okay? So, yun yung pagbabasehan natin pag gumagawa tayo ng research, dito tayo magbe-base sa ating conclusion, inferences, or generalization. So ito lahat plus yung activities na gagawin natin for statistics. Again, the first one, collection, next presentation, and then analysis and interpretation of our, take note, numerical data. So since this is a branch of mathematics. You have questions so far? Alin dito yung hindi naintindihan? May part ba na nalibog mo? Wala? You can always ask question ha. Either you turn on your microphone or you can just send your question sa chat. So I'll try to answer that. Sige, let's move on. Let's talk about the categories of statistics. So statistics is divided into two. We have descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Let's differentiate them. The first one is descriptive statistics. From the name itself, descriptive. Our main goal here is just to describe our data. Yun lang, our main goal is to describe our data. Or we can just simply summarize our data in terms of their most important features or their properties or characteristics. So in this case, we don't give inferences, we don't make conclusions or generalization. We just purely describe and summarize the data. So again, descriptive statistics refers to the field of statistics, which includes the methods of collecting, classifying, graphing, and averaging our data. So magko-collect lang tayo, pwede natin siyang i-classify, i-present natin siya in such a manner na madali siyang maintindihan, like using graphs, and after that we just do averaging, meaning we will just get the average, and by that average we can now describe our numerical data. That's just descriptive statistics. Now let me give you an example, or let me give you examples of pharmacy research which involves only descriptive statistics. Number one, getting the census of the IQ level of the BS pharmacy students of GSDM SFI. So again, getting a census of the IQ level. So definitely from student 1 up to example student number 150, example 150 kayo. Kukunin nyo lang yung IQ level ng mga students. Okay? So isa-summarize natin, itatabulate natin, oh, ito yung mga IQ level ng mga pharmacy students. Wait lang, let me write sa screen ha. So we have here the IQ level, right? And then, pwede natin siyang i-classify. Pwede nating i-classify. For example, gusto natin malaman yung IQ level ng first year, second year, third year, and the fourth year. So ganun yung pag-classify. Andito yung mga IQ levels nila. And then, pwede din natin, as we classify, we can also get the mean or the average. So for example, nakita natin yung mga first year students pala, yung average IQ level nila is like 100. And so on with the other levels. So descriptive statistics lang siya. Anong ginawa natin? Nag-collect tayo ng data ng IQ level ng mga pharmacy students. Nag-classify tayo first year, second year, third year, and fourth year. Present natin siya in a tabular manner, and then we just get the average. So yun lang. And then we will just describe na, oh, the first year students have IQ level of 100. Now, meron tayo, di ba, ang tinatawag na mga standards or specification, or merong mga ranges for interpretation. I'm not just sure kung paano siya ini-interpret. So, kagaya ng example, 90 to 100 na IQ level, average, or kung mas mataas sa 101 or more, ano na siya, above average na siya na IQ. Kung lower than this, so below average. So, i-describe lang natin. Wala tayong inferences, wala tayong conclusion. Ano lang, purely description na ang IQ level pala ng mga first year students ay, for example, average. So yun lang. Okay? That's what you call descriptive statistics. I hope na understand yon. Or pwede din itong another one, a tracer study of the BS Pharmacy graduates of GSD-MSFI. When you say tracer study, you're actually doing a follow-up. Meaning, hahanapin natin yung lahat ng graduates ng BS Pharmacy from the first batch up to the last batch na nag-graduate. So for example, first batch. Batch yun nila Ma'am Cherry Baruiz. First batch yan sila sa doctors. So hahanapin natin sila and then magpa-follow up tayo sa kanila. Ano yung mga possible questions here? Nakapasa na ba sila sa board exam? So ika-classify lang natin whether yes or no. And then itatabulate lang natin ilang percent yung nakapasa na, ilang percent yung hindi pa. And then aside from that, ano pa ang pwedeng i-follow up natin sa kanila sa tracer study? Kung nakapasa na sila sa board exam, saan are they employed or not? So employed ba sila? So yes or no lang din. So ilang percent yung yes, ilang percent ang no. Now kung employed sila, saan ba sila na-employed? Pwede tayong mag-classify according to the different pharmacy practice. I hope you learned this one in your intro to pharm or your perspectives in pharmacy. Ano nga yun? Diba meron tayong like community pharmacy, hospital pharmacy, meron din tayong manufacturing pharmacy, and so on. So again, ika-classify natin sila here. We will just get the numbers. For example, 50% of the graduates are working in a community pharmacy. And then the 35% is in the hospital. And the remaining 15% lang is for, example, 14% is working in the manufacturing firm, and dito pwede tayong maglagay ng others. Kasi siguro hindi sila nag-work dito sa tatlo. Maybe yung iba nasa academe. Maybe yung isa hindi talaga pharmacy related, yung iba hindi talaga pharmacy related yung kanilang trabaho. So again, this is just simple or descriptive statistics. As you can see, we just gather the data, classify them, and then kukunin lang natin yung summary or yung average. Depende kung ano yung gagawin natin, average or summary. And then from there, we can describe the BS Pharmacy graduates of GSD MSFI are all board passers, for example, and that they are 100% employed. But in terms of employability, mga 95% they are working sa pharmacy-related na trabaho, the others yung hindi. So, ganun lang, nag-describe lang tayo, nag-summarize lang tayo ng ating data. Wala tayong ginawang inferences, generalization, or like conclusion. Okay? So again, that is what you call descriptive statistics. I hope nasabtan. Do you have questions? Yung part dyan sa descriptive statistics ang medyo mahirap intindihin. Wala. Sure. Okay. So the next one here, the next division of statistics is what you call inferential statistics. So this time, this demands class high order of critical judgment and mathematical methods. Kasi what is our goal for inferential statistics? We are not just purely collecting and describing and summarizing our data. Instead, this is where we do analysis and interpretation, and as well as prediction of inferences. So dito papasok si hypothesis testing. Malalaman talaga, class, na ang inyong research will really require you to do inferential statistics if you have the hypothesis. So, what do you mean by hypothesis? Anyone na maalala pa kung sa'y meaning sa hypothesis? Kaya murag nag-research man yun mo katong high school mo. Murag naagit mo yung research ba? So far as I can remember, murag nagbuhat dyan kong statistics ani sa someone din ha sa research sa senior high. Murag naag yun. Anyone? Or nakalimtan na, ma'am, past is past. Ano na yung motto sa estudyante? Ito na theory, ma'am, or supposition. Yeah. Okay. So, let's define scientific guess or assumption. Okay. That's correct. When you say hypothesis, our gas-gas na talagang definition for hypothesis is this one is an educated guess. Yes, tama yan siya. An assumption or an educated guess, or pwede ding a tentative solution to the problem that needs to be tested. That needs to be tested. So again, hypothesis is an educated guess. So for example, you have a problem. Now you want to solve this problem. Now, di ba sa research, we do RRL. We have the review of related literature. So as we go on with our readings, we can actually identify tentative solution to our problem. Kasi based sa reading na to, ito pwede pala itong sagot sa problem ko. So ano siya? Educated guess siya kasi meron siyang basis. Based siya sa readings natin. And then tentative solution pa lang siya kasi hindi natin alam kung talaga bang makakasolve siya ng problem natin or hindi. Or kung sa drug pa ito, hindi natin alam kung effective ba talaga siya or hindi. So we need to test hypothesis. So again, we have their hypothesis testing. And when we do hypothesis testing, as we analyze and interpret our data, we need the so-called inferential statistics. So hindi ka lang purely magde-describe, mag-a-analyze ka talaga and mag-i-interpret para makagawa ka ng certain conclusion. So let me give you examples of pharmacy studies that use inferential statistics. Number one, comparing the effectiveness of two anti-hypertensive drugs. Okay? Example, Do you know drugs for hypertension? So far, even if you are still in your second year, baka lang may alam kayo kasi meron kayong someone in the family who is hypertensive and merong tinitake na maintenance drug. Do you know? Meron ba kayong alam? Okay, sige. Okay, very good. Mostly sa mga nagte-take ng maintenance drug, hypertension is increase in blood pressure. Do not forget that. Again, hypertension is increase in blood pressure, and our normal normal BP natin is less than 120 over less than 80. So this is the so-called systolic blood pressure, and then sa baba is the so-called diastolic blood pressure. So kailangan ang systole is less than 120. Again, less than 120. And then yung diastole dapat less than 80. Pag tumaas siya dyan, example, the BP is 130 over 79. So kahit na yung diastole is 79 pero mataas yung systole, hypertensive pa rin yan, class ha. So any of the two, either systole or the diastole, as long as tumaas siya dyan sa values na yan, the person may be hypertensive. So kung kamusad, mag-BP mo sa inyong sarili, kailangan as early as now, kabalo mo whether mataas yung BP ninyo or hindi. Now, actually, tama yung sinend nyo sa chat. Ang pinaka-common talaga na ginagamit, pwedeng amlodipine. We call this amlodipine. Generic ito ha, this is the name of the drug. Again, this is the name of the drug. I will not include brand names because we have a lot of branded drugs in the market. Hindi natin sila i-include. Ang pinaka-common sa kanila, Neo Black. Ano yung pinaka-common? Tapos pangutanong ninyo kinsa ang nag-prescribe ang silingan. So mauna siya, pero mauna siya nga sikat kayo kay ang silingan ang nag-prescribe. Now, aside from this, we have the losartan. So, generic din yan, name of drug din yan. It's the most common brand. The Lifezar siguro is the most common brand for losartan. So these two are anti-hypertensive drugs. We give them to, syempre, hypertensive people. Now, for example, we want to compare the effectiveness of these two drugs. So how do we do that? Syempre, we do experiments. Whether we do it using laboratory animals or in some cases, yung sa mga nagkakandak na talaga ng clinical trials, syempre, kayo students, you are not allowed to do human testing, so hanggang animal testing lang tayo. Pero sa mga different laboratories class, since they are allowed, and if they will secure permit from the Food and Drug Administration, they can do experimentation using human subjects. So for example, human subjects talaga, no, meron silang example, 10 people, bibigyan nila ng amlodipine, and then meron silang another 10 people na bibigyan nila ng losartan. They will follow these people, they will check the blood pressure from time to time. And then at the end of the experimentation, hindi lang descriptive statistics ang gagawin. Inferential statistics talaga. Meron tayong statistical tools na after getting the example, the mean blood pressure of these two, ito na yung question na, is there a significant difference? Yun na, pag isasagutin natin yan na question, meaning inferential statistics na yan. Kasi we are doing analysis kung meron ba talagang difference yung A and yung L. And then, pag nakita natin through the result of our statistical testing na meron siyang difference, then we can do conclusion. So pag meron tayong conclusion or inferences, inferential statistics ang tawag dyan. Okay? Okay, sige. Sandra. Sige. Now, we have another thing here, predicting the academic performance of the BS Pharmacy students and the factors affecting it. wait lang ha. Wait lang. Sige. Let us continue. Predicting the academic performance of the BS Pharmacy students and the factors affecting it. So academic performance, most of the time, if we are talking about academic performance, we are talking about the grades of the students. So for example, yan yung target natin. Gusto natin malaman yung academic performance ng mga BS Pharmacy students. And then we will look at the factors that will affect this. Okay, so for example, yung study habit, what else? The, ano pa ang nag-affect ng academic performance? I'm not sure. The study habits, and then pwede din family or environmental factors. Ayan. Pwede din example type of family. Example, kung single parent, nuclear family, or extended na family, and so on. These are just examples ha. So i-check natin class yung itong mga factors. Tapos i-correlate natin siya doon sa grades ng ating mga pharmacy students. So inferential statistics pa rin siya kasi hindi ka lang purely mag-summarize ng study habit nila or yung mga environmental factors nila or yung type of family nila. Hindi lang natin purely i-describe yan. Kailangan natin siya i-check whether meron silang effect dito sa meron silang influence, sa academic performance ng mga students. So pwede din, yes, pwede din siya Florence motivation. Pwede siyang internal na motivation or external motivation. So isa yan siya sa factor. Now again, this is an example of a study that will require you to use inferential statistics. Again, we will be doing analysis of these factors, whether they have influence sa academic performance. So we are not just describing the factors, but we are analyzing whether they really have influence. Now, aside from that, evaluating the patient's perception on branded and generic drugs. Actually, this is a very gasgas na study sa pharmacy or gasgas na research sa pharmacy. Yun nga, example, perception. Perception of the community. Example, sa community tayo nag-conduct ng study. Perception nila whether they are into generic na drugs only or they are into branded drugs. So, we will be doing inferential statistics here kasi hindi lang tayo magsa-summarize kung ito gusto nila branded drugs, itong mga customers na ito gusto nila generic na drugs. Hindi lang hanggang summary. Kailangan talaga natin siyang i-analyze and i-interpret yung perception nila. And bakit ganun yung kanilang perception. Actually, this one is a gasgas na study sa pharma, but until now, hindi pa rin ito totally nabibigyan ng solusyon. Kasi nakita niyo naman, di ba, ngayon, as in recently talaga, nagka-problem with the supply of biogesic, if I'm not mistaken, biogesic and the other Unilab na mga products. Kita talaga natin dyan na the perception ng ating community is yung inclination nila is towards the branded drugs. Nakikita ko kasi siya sa Facebook, sa FB ko siya nakita na merong scarcity sa supply. Pero actually, wala namang scarcity sa supply ng paracetamol. Ang may problem lang is biogesic lang. So yung brand lang na biogesic, but the rest of the brands or even generic products of paracetamol, available naman siya sa market. And then meron akong nakausap na in their family, hindi talaga sila gumagamit ng other brands of paracetamol. They are called branded generics though. Hindi sila gumagamit ng other brands of paracetamol except for biogesic lang. So ano pa yung ini-expect na season of flu ngayon, maraming nagatrangkaso, maraming nagkakasakit. So mag-expect talaga tayo na if they are into biogesic, we will really have a low supply. Kay taas ang demand, hindi kaya ng Unilab yung production. Okay? Pwede din natin studyhan yan. Ano kaya yung factor that makes the community decide na ito yung pipiliin nila. Pero actually, isa lang talaga yung ano dyan. Isang factor dyan is si John Lloyd. Grabe magod sila mag-advertise. Mauna siya nga ang inclination sa public. Anyway, abot na ta din ha atong ginaistoryahan inferential statistics. Okay, questions about the difference between the descriptive and in the inferential statistics. Kasi na-confuse paghihapon. Actually, kanang descriptive statistics, ang example ana mean, median, and mode. I don't know if you can still remember that in your high school days. Diba? You are asked to compute for the mean, the median, and the mode. Descriptive statistics na class, kaya nag-describe lang taan na sa atuang data. Pero pag pinagawa na kayo ng t-test, ANOVA, Pearson R correlation, dito na yan siya sa inferential statistics. Okay? So, wala'y pangutana. Sure nagyod. Sure nagyod siya. Okay, let's move on. Kung wala'y questions, let's talk about research variables and measurements. Dugtong din nato ni siya pirmi sa research. Kaya diha yung ginagamit si stat. When I was in college, I was not really, we had statistics, but I don't know anong dili jud ko kasabot sa iyaha. Nasabtan ako ni siyang statistics no katong ano na, katong nagtudlo na ko statistics. Kung nag-masters ko and even, di ba nag-PhD ko, wala ko kasabutan ni. Pero katong giingnan ko ni Ma'am Eroy nga rin sa pagtudlo statistics kaya ako daw ang nag-handle sa research. I was actually kanang napilitan ko mag-learn of statistics and yun lang yung time na naintindihan ko na siya. And maganda din pala na maintindihan mo yung statistics. If ever you are inclined to research or gusto ka mag-academe, nindot ko di ay magtuon og statistics. So sige, let's move on. Research variables and measurements. So sa research, we have the so-called variables, and these are actually the factors or the constructs that we manipulate or we measure in our study. So again, anything na i-manipulate natin or i-measure natin sa study natin are called research variables. So what are these things na minamanipulate or minimeasure natin? It can be attribute or characteristic of a person or a thing. Okay? Pwede siyang person or pwede siyang object as long as minimeasure natin yung characteristic na yon or yung attribute na yon. Research variable ang tawag. So what are the specific examples? We have the age of a person. If we want to know the age of a person sa research natin, that becomes a research variable. Or if we want to know the educational qualifications or the educational attainment, magiging research variable din yan siya kapag gusto natin siyang makuha or i-measure sa study. The gender also and the civil status. So, di ba meron tayong mga questionnaire class, yung number 1 question talaga dyan, yung demographic profile. I believe na kapag answer na kayo ng different types of questionnaires, makikita natin mag-a-ask sila ng age, mag-a-ask sila ng gender natin or yung sex, research variable nila yon. Kasi nagma-manipulate sila or nagme-measure sila ng data na yon. Research variables. Now, when you say measurement, syempre, this is the process of determining the value or label of a specific variable in research. Okay? Hahanapin natin yung certain value, i-measure natin yung label of that specific attribute or characteristic of a person or an object. Now we have in statistics or in research, we have different classifications of variables. Marami tayong pwedeng pag-aralan sa research and i-classify natin sila kung saan sila na-belong. So meron tayong 4 na classification. We can classify variables as either discrete or continuous. Pwede din namang qualitative and quantitative. Pwede din sa research talaga ang pinakaginagamit, the dependent and the independent variables. So katong mga naninood og trabaho sa research sa inyong high school years, I hope you can still remember that you were asked to identify the dependent and the independent variables in your research. So we will have a review of that para hindi kayo malito. And then we can also classify our research as univariable, bivariable, or multivariable distribution. Okay, sige, let us start. Let's start first with the first classification, either discrete or continuous. So ano yung kaibahan nitong dalawa? Pag sinabing discrete variables, ito yung kinakount natin siya. Again, we can only know the value or the label of the variable by counting or enumeration. Meaning this is finite, makount natin from example 1 to 100. Discrete variables yan siya. Example, ang inyong gustong i-measure sa study ninyo is kung how many pharmacy students do we have in GSD-MSFI. So, syempre, malalaman natin yun by counting. Ika-count natin ilan lahat yung students or yung pharmacy students sa doctors. So, pag alam na natin, discrete variable ang tawag dyan. Or if we want to know how many professors or how many pharmacists do we have in General Santos City, discrete variables yan lahat. Bakit? Kasi we can count them. Yun lang ang para madali, no, kay let us save space ato ang brain cells. Ayaw ninyo i-memorize ta ng words din ha. That is not a good practice in studying. You free up storage capacity. So let's just learn how to use keywords. Pag narinig nyo ang word na discrete variable, you just correlate it to counting. Discrete variables means we are going to count the subjects para alam natin kung ilan sila lahat. Now, syempre, yung mga hindi pwedeng i-count, dun yan siya mabibelong sa continuous variables. Again, these are variables that cannot be counted, but we can still measure. We can still measure, but the measurement that we will use is not counting. Okay, hindi tayo magka-count. So for example, intelligence, example, IQ level. Hindi naman natin ma-count ang IQ level ng isang person, but we can measure through testing. So continuous variable ang tawag dyan. For example, beauty. Hindi mo naman ma-count ang beauty ng isang person, but we can measure subjectively though. Subjective yung pag-measure natin sa beauty. Kasi di ba beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So depende sa kanya kung nagagandahan siya or hindi. Kung ipapa-measure mo siya, pwede mo siyang ipa-rate from 1 to 10. So ganon. Pero walang counting na nangyari. So continuous variable. Or even the effectiveness. Example, effectiveness of our drugs sa pharmacy. We cannot actually count effectiveness, but we can measure. And so does cleanliness. So again, itong first na classification ng ating variable sa research, pag ma-count, we call that discrete. Pag hindi ma-count, but we can still measure, continuous ang tawag dyan. Para madali ang atuang istorya. Okay, questions? Questions? Wala. Okay. Sige, dili kayo na ito. Wait lang ha. Low bat. Kasi mapatay akong laptop. Kajot ka. Sige, next classification sa ato ang variables. We have here the quali and the quanti variables. From the name itself actually, you will have a hint kung unsang klaseng variable na siya. Quali means we don't have numerical values for this. So definitely we just have to categorize the variables. And syempre pag quanti, we have numerical values. So let's go back to quali. You can see on the screen a variable that can give categorical response. So for example, pag tinanong ka ano ang occupation mo, di ba hindi ka naman sasagot ng numerical value. Alam mo yung ka 1. Wala man ay occupation mo 1. So definitely categories. We can categorize. Oh, I am a pharmacist. So basically the category will be like sa medical profession. Okay? Or if tinanong ka ng gender, hindi ka naman sasagot dapat ng numerical here. So makategorize natin, babae, lalaki, and so on. The same thing with the civil status, the religious affiliation, and even the political parties. So pag tinanong ka, ano yung political na party mo, hindi ka din sasagot ng numbers dyan. Siyempre, sasagot ka kung anong pangalan ng political party mo. So, meron tayong category for this. Now, sa research, we call that qualitative variable. Okay, qualitative variable. Now, ang quantitative, these are anything na merong numerical values. Merong numerical values na pwedeng mag-represent. So, for example, tinanong ka ng height, syempre magbibigay ka ng number. So, quantitative variable yon. Or salary ang tinanong, or number of children, even your weight, or even the time now, numerical value yon, numbers. So, anything na merong number, we call that sa research as quantitative variable. So, I hope that is clear. Now, moving on, let's give more importance sa dependent and the independent variables kasi ito talaga yung pinapa-identify sa research. Kung unsa ang independent o unsa ang dependent variable sa inyong study. Now, pag sinabing independent variables class, ito yung kinokontrol or minamanipulate in the study. We also call this predictor variable. Let me write sa screen. Predictor variable. Ayan. We also call this predictor variable because in the study, these are the variables that will predict the outcome. Again, these are the variables that will predict the outcomes. So, na ang predictor variable siya. So, we can control this or we can manipulate these variables. Now, since we talked about the outcomes, ang outcomes naman is the dependent variable. So, ito yung mini-measure natin based doon sa independent variables. That is why we also call this outcome variable. So again, i-summarize ko, independent variables are those being controlled or manipulated or predict the outcome. And syempre, the outcome, the one that we measure in our study is the so-called dependent variable. So, bigyan ko kayo ng example para mas madali sa life ninyo mag-identify ng independent and dependent variable. So, example, the researcher would like to determine the predictive validity of entrance requirements for freshman students. Okay? Write ako sa screen. Again, anong gusto ng researcher? Gusto, hindi man straight eh. Okay, ano ang gusto ng researcher class? Gusto niya mabalaan ang predictive validity of the entrance requirements para sa mga freshman students. Diba itong first year mo, I'm not sure though, but ang mga first year actually, anong hinahanap sa inyo? Diba pinapatake kayo ng entrance exam, tapos pagkatapos ng mag-take ng entrance exam, pwedeng bibigyan kayo ng mga classification like S1 ba kayo, S2, S3, and so on. Pwede ding hanapin yung NAT result ninyo, National Achievement Test, no? Ang NAT, I'm not sure, nag-take ba ko NAT. And hahanapin din yung school grade ninyo during your high school. So sa inyo, syempre sa senior high. Yan yung hinahanap natin pag nagpa-enroll kayo as first year student sa college. Now, ang gusto malaman ng researcher, kung ito bang mga things na ito makapredict sa performance ng mga first year college. This is actually in terms of their grade. So, kung i-draw natin sa research, meron tayong tinatawag na conceptual framework. Pangitan ako lagi. Okay. Conceptual framework. Ito yung pinapadraw kayo ng example ng box. Tapos may arrow, and then another box. Ayan. Tapos, yung first box, tatawagin nating independent variable. Yung second box, ililabel siya as dependent variable. So pag pinagawa kayo nito, kailangan ma-identify nyo correctly kung ano yung ilalagay nyo dyan sa box, sa dalawang boxes. Sabi ko kanina, dependent variables are the outcome variables. Ito yung magiging, anong tawag dyan? Magiging result ng pag-control or pag-manipulate natin ng independent variable. Ito yung i-measure natin. So in this case, 'di ba, ang i-measure natin yung performance, meaning yung grades ng first year students or first year college students. So ano yung magpe-predict dito? Ang gusto malaman kasi ng researcher yung entrance requirement. So yan yung ilalagay natin class sa independent variable, yung NAT, yung kanilang entrance examination scores, and syempre yung kanilang school grade. So lahat ng ito, independent variable kasi sila yung magpe-predict ng grades or yung performance ng students. So the next time you will be asked to do research, dapat alam nyo na how to identify the independent and the dependent variable. Ayun yung kalimtip. Most of the time, pag nagtuturo ako nito, nagsistart ako sa dependent variable. Yun yung unang tinatanong ko sa student. What is the dependent variable? Kasi mas madali kasi yun hanapin kasi we are talking about the outcome. So outcome niya, yung grade. Now, pag ma-identify nyo na yun, na ito pala yung outcome niya, yung grade, ito yung i-measure natin. So babalikan natin si independent variable. Ano yung magpe-predict dito sa grades ng students? So in this case lang ha, kasi ang gusto niya lang naman ng researcher is yung entrance requirements. So enumerate natin yung entrance requirements. That's how you know the independent and the dependent variables. Any question? Or should I give you another example to let's test whether you have really understood the difference between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Let me just unshare the screen and let us use the whiteboard. Let me delete this and let me give you another scenario. You have to identify the independent and the dependent variable. Isusulat ko siya. The boxes na lang ha. Kasi ito naman talaga yung structure niya sa research. Let me think first. Yung kanina. Perception of the community on generic and branded drugs. Okay. Yan lang. Perception of the community on generic and branded drugs. Let us identify the IV and the DV. Hindi pwede magbaliktad ito ha. Kasi yung arrow is pointing towards the second box. And then remember, since it's pointing to the second box, it means this one is the outcome. So ito yung nag-i-influence ang independent variable. Sige daw, let's try. Ano kaya ang dependent, sabi ko kanina, mostly nagsistart ako sa dependent variable. Ano kaya yung dependent variable dyan sa study na yan? Ano kaya yung magiging outcome? Or ano kaya yung i-measure sa study? Diba? Yung, sabi ko, pag dependent variable, outcome. Or, para mas madali siya maintindihan, yan yung i-measure sa study. What do you think? Sa study na ito. Okay, very good. Isulat ko ha para makita niyo. Very good. Ang i-measure o yung outcome ng study na ito is syempre the perception. Perception of the community. Ito man yung i-measure natin sa study. Ano kaya yung perception nila? Okay, so perception of the community. Dito ang DV. So anong perception ito? Siyempre, babalik tayo sa independent variable. Ang kinokontrol natin sa study na ito is yung branded and yung generic na drugs. So, yan yung independent variable natin. Okay? Very good. Na ma-identify nyo si IV and si DV. So, muna siya. Nag-start ko pirmi sa dependent variable. Kaya mas dali mo na siya pangitaon. Kaya muna siya ang gina-measure kung sa Bisaya. Mag-Bisaya na yun ko. Muna siya ang gina-measure. Muna siya ang outcome sa study. So yung kinokontrol natin, ano ba pinagpipilian natin dito? That's what you mean by control. Ang kinontrol natin dito, ang inask natin sa patient or sa community, yung branded lang at generic. Wala na tayong ibang drugs na, types of drugs na sinali dyan. Branded and generic lang. That's what you mean by controlling the variables. Tayo ang nag-set. Okay? Let me give you another one. Pag-isip sa ko ha. Example, ganito ang title ng study. Blood glucose lowering activity of ampalaya. Ay, baliktad. Wait. It's not how you make a title. Of Momordica charantia. This is the scientific name of ampalaya. Okay. This one is an experimental na study. Ganun pa rin. Let's identify the IV and the DV. Ayaw ninyo i-interchange yun ha. Kung asa nag-point ang arrow, din kagid pirmi ang DV. So the other one is the IV. Okay, I'll wait for the others. Pero may question mark. May na question mark meaning na dili mo sigurado. Question mark. Okay. Sige, that's okay. No problem. Ano so my first my first question is, let's start with the dependent variable. What is being measured in this study? Ano kaya yung i-measure? Blood glucose, very good. Blood glucose. Blood glucose lang, di ba? So that will be the DB, blood glucose. Ganyan lang, blood glucose. That's the dependent variable. Ano siya kung may ginapangutana, di ba, kagain na? Walay lowering, walay lowering. Blood glucose, kung ano yung i-measure mo, yun yung dependent variable. Okay? Blood glucose lang. Most of the time, we use the ano, di ba? Tawag dyan, glucometer. And mostly, ang unit dyan for the blood glucose is milligrams per deciliter. Okay? I hope naintindihan ha kung ano ang i-measure, yun yung dependent variable. And, ano yung independent variable natin dito? Ano yung magpapredict sa blood glucose? Siyempre, ang palaya. So, we will write here, Momordica charantia, ang palaya, leaves. Okay? That's the independent variable because that is the one that is being manipulated in the study. When I say manipulated, ito kasi yung binigay natin doon sa subject natin. I hope nakuha yon. Ang meaning ng independent variable, the one that can predict the outcome or the one that is being controlled or manipulated. And when you say manipulated, ito yung binigay natin doon sa ating patient. And then pagbigay natin dito sa patient natin, mineasure natin yung blood glucose. So pag nakita natin yung blood glucose, doon tayo makakapagbigay ng conclusion whether it can really lower the glucose of the patient or not. So yung lowering activity na hindi mo yan siya isasama dito sa dependent variable. Yan yung magiging conclusion natin. Ang mineasure lang natin, blood glucose. So I hope nagkasinabtanay ta ana. Do you have questions? Walay? Sure na yun? Isa pa. Sige, let's have another one. So, isip sa ako nga. Nag-brain exercise mo na ito diri. Nag-brain exercise mo, nag-brain exercise kung ko. Kaya, yes, Mariel. Parang input at saka output. Actually, almost the same lang sila. Input, ano yung binigay mo, ano yung nilagay mo, ano yung kinontrol mo. Output will be the dependent variable. Kaya lang brain exercise na mag-isip ko. Mag-isip ko study. So, gani ang study nga bago lang sa pharma. Wala, ako kahinumdum sa ilang. Okay. One study sa pharma ngayon is this one. Ay, the previous batch pala. So, plant nila, nakalimot, hinuhod ko. Buta nga na lang na kuning line plant. Ay, kasi common yung plant. Isa na lang. Wait lang. Bilisan ako. Okay, para common. Okay, this one. Diuretic activity. Bati. Wala ko kami sa scientific name sa lumbati. Kaya pag sa research mo, gina-appeal dyan na to as scientific name. Una, siya ginasulat. Diuretic activity of Lumea balsamifera sambong leaves. What do you mean by diuretic? Diuresis. Sa meaning na. Anyone? Okay, very good. Pampaihi. Pampaihi. Very good. Pag makabatigan mo, this is an anti-diuretic, meaning para dili makaihi ang patient. Pero kung diuretic, syempre makaihi ang patient. Okay? Sige, let's try to identify the IV and the IV, EV. Sabi na, ano, Iponda. Ibo, i-correct yun. Spelling. Mali nga po spelling. Wala kayo. It's okay. Pero na question mark. Hindi gyapon mo sigurado. Sige. So akong unang pangutan na in this kind of study, di ba ingon mo kagain na ang diuretic pampaihi. Sige. So ang pangutan na what is being measured here? Again, ang question, what is being measured in this experiment? Example, na ako'y ilaga. Ako ang ipainom si Sambong. Kasi gi-measure na ko dito. Ang ihi, very good. Ang ihi ang gina-measure. Ang urine, very good. Ang ihi sa ilaga. In terms of what? In terms of pagkuha na ko sa ihi, unsa ako pag-measure ato? Very good, urine volume. So mao na siyang imuhang dependent variable. Nakuha, nalibog yapon. Ay ninyo ibutang na diuretic activity. Ato na himuan og conclusion depende sa urine volume. So ang inyo hadjong isipon unsa man ako i-measure ani nga study. Ingon man mo kagain na ihi pag may pampaihi pag may diuretic activity. So ihi ako ang kwaon in terms of what? Syempre urine volume. Buti na lang question mark. Monit na siya pala tandaan nga dili siya siguro sa mukay. Anyway, sige, urine volume. So unsa ato ang independent variable? What is being measured here? I mean, what is being manipulated here? Ano yung binigay natin sa subject? Yung sambong. So you write here, Blumea balsamifera. Sambong leaves. Okay, that's IV and DV. So, ayaw dyan mo kalimut ha na ang DV is the outcome and that is being measured in the study. We have to be specific. That is for the experimental na study ha. Isipon yun ninyo unsa nga part ang gina-measure. So, unsa nga area of measurement. Oh, example na ito ng research al. Yung dalawang binigay ko sa inyo, itong yung tatlo na siguro, yung kanina, mga title na ito ng research sa pharma, yung binigay ko sa inyo. And we are identifying the independent and the dependent variable. Okay? Last na lang before we'll take a break. Let's have another study na hindi experimental. Mag-isip sa ako. Erase. Okay, this one is the title of the research. Influence of medical fake news on vaccine hesitancy of residents in General Santos City. This is not an experimental na research. Kumana ito ang example sa experimental na research. This one is a descriptive na research. So we also have the ID and the DV here. pinapa-identify din ito sa research class. Ay, ano? Okay. D and then the IV. Okay? Take note. Influence of medical fake news on vaccine hesitancy of residents in General Santos City. We know na daghan kayo medical fake news, no? Rehas anang pag magpa-vaccine daw ka, mahimo ka og zombie. Kaya, pag magpa-vaccine daw ka, kay na doon na chips like 666. Diba mga ingana ng mga medical fake news. Na itong gusto mabalaan din kung naabay influence ang medical fake news sa vaccine hesitancy sa mga nagpuyo sa General Santos City. Okay? So let's start with the dependent variable. What is being measured here in the study? Ano yung outcome? Ano yung outcome dito? What do you think is the outcome? Very good. Vaccine hesitancy. Ito yung outcome. Vaccine hesitancy. Now, para mabalaan ninyo ang independent variable, you ask the question, what makes them hesitant? Ano, hindi man sila magpa-vaccine? Okay? Because of, gusto man natin ma-measure ang medical fake news. So, ano lang, pag dili gani siya experimental na study, this is the example, and this is how you predict the IV and the DV. The independent variable, the predictor variable, bayan ko kagayin na pag independent variable, this is also known as the predictor variable because this can predict the outcome. So, syempre, the medical fake news. Kani pa lang daan plus influence of, kani pa lang na word, this will give you a hint that the following variable or the following words will be the independent variable. And then this one will give you a hint that this will be the outcome. So influence of medical fake news on vaccine hesitancy. So this will be the outcome. They might be hesitant or not. So ito yung i-measure natin. And ano yung nag-predict? The medical fake news. Okay? So I hope klaro-klaro na siya. Very good. DV is vaccine hesitancy. IV is medical fake news. Pwede po din yung ibutang actually influence of medical fake news. Pwede po fake news na lang. Kung sana study na encounter na this. So kadaghan nag-study nga ni Agi no kay di nakahinumdum. Pero sa pharmacy, daghan na kay tag-study nga experimental. We have lots of studies about anti-diabetic na activity or we call that blood glucose lowering. So daghan na kay plants ang nastudihan ana. And most likely sila tanan positive, meaning those plants can really lower the blood sugar. Pero syempre, animal study lang ito tanan through the use of mice or rats. Last time, ang highest sa research kay blood glucose lowering activity using mice. And ang ilahang plant material is rambutan. Pero na po yung experimental na study nga, diuretic po ito ilaha. Nakalimot ko sa ilahang plant material, pero ilahang gamit ato kay rats. Mice and rats are different. Mice tong gamay. Rats tong dako. So, pag napili nila nga study, wala gid mo choice. Kailangan din mo mugunit kung ilaga ha. Kung kung ang study nag-require nga rods inyong gamiton kay dili pwede ang mice kay paano na to ma-measure ang ihi sa mice no nga gamay kaayo sila mo na nga rods jud ang ilahang gigamit. Nakatuon yun sila gunit sa rods. Ako silang gitudluan paano maggunit pero taman lang dito. Ikaw ninyo pagunita ulit kay damak at joke lang. Dili ko ganahan. Hindi ko ganahan ko kaayo ang rods. Dako ra ba kay siya ngipon? Kung mapaakan ka nga. Dulot jud. Unya kanira bang mga ilaga kay pagpaakon kanila dili dapat nimo sila kanang ilabay good. Syempre mamatay sila. Or kung paakon kanila, pag imuhang magud i-shake imuhang kamot para buhian kanila. Samot kada ko imuhang samad kay dulot mo na sila magpaak. So kailangan nimo siya buhian. Na ako'y hugot ana. So akong hugot ana. Kailangan nimo i-let go para dili ka masakitan ng taman-taman. Wala akong hugot sa ilaga. Pag buhian man gud nimo ang ilaga, buhian pud kaniya. So dili na kaniya paakon. Wala akong hugot. Mag-handle din kami. Mag-handle pud mo ilaga. Di ba imuhang ate, ang imuhang ate Crystal, wala lang to sila nag-ilaga kay lahi man to ilang study. Ano man to ilang study, quali, nag-interview lang man sila ato. Pero yung mga classmates, doha ka grupo nag-handle jud og ilaga. Sa ilahang pharmacology though, kamutanan actually sa lab, kailangan mo magtuon jud og handle. Whether your study is experimental or not, pag mag-pharmacology na gani mo, mag-handle jud mo og ilaga. So you are all required to learn how to properly handle the mice. Pero dili nang itom ha. Ano ta dire, racist ta gamay dinhi. Wala ta nagagamit og itom nga ilaga sa research. Wala ta nagagamit og itom na ilaga sa research, my God. Dili na ako to kaya. Puti lang na ilaga. Puti lang, racist na gamay. And at the same time, ang good sa pharma. Even basta rabbits ato ang gamiton or rats tong dagko. Wala ta nagagamit og kanang colored ones. Mga puti jud na pirmi atong gamiton kay for example nagapainom ta sa ilaha og tambal or kanang mga plant material. Dili man gud nato makita. Racist jud. Dili nato makita ang skin reactions kung itom. Mas makita nato pag puti. For example, nag-develop siya og rashes. Kana, dali nato makita pag white ang ilaga or white ang rabbit. So racist na gamay din. Pag itom manggod, dili nato makita nga ay nag-rashes na di siya. Pwede di siya mag-develop og allergic reactions. Mga ingana na mga things. Nag-practice na kagsugod. Pwede na ka mag-practice na kagsugod kay na ilaga gi-require ata sila sa ilahang laboratory. I was not their laboratory teacher pero ilahang lab teacher gi-require sila magpalit og ilaga and mag-handle. Ang problema lang kung masagol nimo ang babae ug lalaki nga ilaga kay after 1 month or 2 months naghanjud mo gummy bears din sa inyong balay. Kay mga anak din na labi na kay paspas kay na sila mag-multiply. Paspas ka. 15 plus na, grabe. So the next classification of variables we have in research is this one. We may classify them according to the distribution. So we have univariable, bivariable, and multivariable. Syempre, univariable, uni means one, meaning we only have one variable involved are to be measured in research. So for example, height of second-year BS pharmacy students. What do we have to measure here? Syempre, height. And isa lang yon. Height lang talaga, wala nang iba. So univariable distribution yan siya. But if we have two variables, then we call that bivariable distribution. Example of this, we have here an ice cream shop keep track of how much ice cream they sell versus the temperature of the day. So if we look at the table, we have two variables. We have two measurements. The first one, they are keeping track of the temperature of the day and at the same time, their sales. So kung gusto kasi nilang malaman whether there is an influence sa temperature doon sa kita nila sa pagbenta nila ng ice cream. So since we have two measurements here, then we call this bivariable distribution. But if it is more than two, we now call that multivariable distribution. So meron tayong 3 or more variables that we need to control or measure. We have here example, the teacher would like to keep track the enrollment in college in terms of program, year level, and gender. So as you can see, for example, si Ma'am Erin, kasi siya naman di ba yung nag-enroll, sometimes si Ma'am Mabe. If they want to keep track the enrollment, they will be classifying the enrollees in terms of the program they enroll. At the same time, they will have to classify pa the students on what year level they are in and also their gender. Therefore, if we tabulate this, for example, this is just for BS Pharmacy, then we have classifications here, first year, second year, third year, and fourth year. And then aside from that, the first year, second year, and fourth year will be further classified whether they are male or female. So marami ka ditong variables that you need to consider. So unlike the previous example that they just measured the temperature and the sales, this time medyo marami kang i-take into consideration. So multivariable distribution ang tawag. So that is the end for the variables in research. Again, the first one is summarize natin, continuous versus discrete. Discrete kapag ka naka-count, and then continuous if we cannot count but still we can measure. So that's the first one. And then we have qualitative and quantitative. Quali means no numerical data. Quanti means we have numbers, we have numerical data. And then the most important classification of variables, the IV and the DV. The IV is the predictor variable, that is what we control and manipulate in the study, while the outcome being measured is the dependent variable. And lastly, according to distribution, pag isa lang ang variable na mini-measure, univariable. Siyempre, pag dalawa, bivariable. And if it's 3 or more, then we now call that multivariable distribution. Okay? So I hope nagkasinabot ta, Ana. Let's move on to the levels of measurement. But you have questions first before ta mag-move on sa levels of measurement. Sina mo'y gustong ipangutana or i-clarify. Wala. Sure na? Okay. Sige. Let us continue. Levels of measurements or the types of data that we can gather when we conduct research. And also this type of data will dictate us what statistical tool or tools are we going to use in the analysis and interpretation. So take note, class, in statistics, we have 4 types of data. We have the ratio scale, the interval scale. Other name for interval scale is continuous measurement data. But for some class, pinagsasama na nila itong dalawa kasi konti lang naman yung difference nila. But aside from the two, we have the ordinal scale or ordered categorical data. And lastly, we have the nominal scale or the categorical data. Let's start with the first one. Let's start with the nominal scale. Take note, if the data is classified as nominal, it means that we don't have numerical values here. Okay, again, wala tayong numerical values. Meaning we only have categorical data. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na for example, in a questionnaire, you are asked about your sex, then you can answer either you are male or a female. Walang numerical data. But we can categorize. Dito yung male, dito yung female. We call that nominal scale. The same thing with the employment status, with whether you are full-time or part-time or whatever. Marital status also, single, married, widow. We don't have numerical values here, but instead we can also categorize. So sa quizzes and sa exam nito, I will give you data examples, and then you have to classify whether they are nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. So yun yung gagawin ninyo. Do not forget, pag nominal, ito yung walang numerical value. Instead, we will just do classification or magka-categorize lang tayo. Next, we have the ordinal scale data. This type of data can actually have numerical values, but these numerical values are just used for ranking. So muna siya nga ang tawag sa ordinal scale is also ordered categorical data, because we have orders here, we have ranking. And this is what you see in questionnaires class. Yun bang may ranking, iparate ka from 1 to 10. Though meron siyang numbers, pero hindi talaga siya nagre-represent ng measurement, certain measurement, or hindi siya nagre-represent ng counting. Again, ginagamit lang natin yung numbers for ranking. So for example, merong question na or merong statement doon sa questionnaire, tapos ang pagpipilian mo is numbers like positive 2, positive 1, 0, negative 1, negative 2. And these numbers have verbal interpretations. So pag in-answer mo positive 2, that means markedly better or a bit better, about the same, a bit worse, or markedly worse. So for example, binigyan ka ng, you are experiencing pain, and binigyan ka ng pain reliever. So after giving the pain reliever, you are asked to grade the pain. So i-rate mo yung pain ngayon, kung ano na yung na-feel mo after giving the medication. Kung parehas pa lang, then you score 0, meaning about the same. Or kung hindi talaga siya nagkaroon ng effect, instead nag-worsen pa, so you may choose either negative 1 or negative 2. Kung nawala yung pain, either positive 1 or positive 2. So again, for ordinal, we have numerical values, but we just use this for ranking. We have orders na sinusunod dito. So pwede din naman sa ordinal scale class yung sa questionnaire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Meron minsan strongly agree. Diba meron ganito na mga questionnaire, ito agree or moderately agree, ito neutral, and then disagree or moderately disagree, and then ito strongly disagree. So pag nakakakita kayo class ng questionnaire na merong ganitong format na you will be asked to just choose the numbers, but the numbers have verbal interpretation, that is under the ordinal scale in statistics. Pwede din yung sometimes, example, i-rate mo siya 1 if never, 2 if sometimes, ganon, or 3 is always. Yung mga ganon na mga verbal interpretations, they belong to the what do you call that? Ordinal scale. Socio-economical status po, ma'am. So ordinal po siya mabilong. What do you mean by socio-economical status? Marijo. Like, yung Pinagpipilian dyan sa socio-economical status. Yung income, monthly income. Tama ba? Pag monthly income lang kasi, status po like high, average, and low. That is actually in the nominal scale. Nominal scale yan siya kasi categories yan. So, socio-economic status. Categorical ito. Wala kasi tayong numbers here like low, average, and high. Even if may numbers yan, pwede pa rin siyang nominal kasi nagka-categorize lang tayo. Example, may questionnaire nagtatanong ng iyong monthly family income. Let me write sa screen. Monthly family income. Tapos may choices. Piso hangtod 10,000, 10,000, 1 hangtod, for example, 50,000. Ngay nga na, though may numbers dyan, class, pero category kasi ito, mag-check ka kasi kung saan na-belong yung income ng family ninyo. So kung dito na-belong, so dito ka mag-check, nominal data ito. Categories kasi ang tinitingnan natin dito. We are not really concerned with the numbers. Hindi kasi natin siya isasali during the interpretation. So, categories. Again, pag merong categories, nominal. Okay? Yung ordinal is more on the rating or the order, ranking. Okay? So, like, yes, yung sinasabi ninyo na example sa teacher's evaluation, sa teacher's evaluation, hindi ko na maalala. Sa teacher's evaluation, parang may 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 ata doon. And then you are asked to rank your or assess your teacher, for example, based on the mastery of the subject. If you think that she is really a master of that certain subject, then you give her a rating of 5. If you think na hindi niya talaga alam yung pinaggagawa niya, so 1. So ranking, we are concerned with the ranking when it comes to ordinal scale. So yun yung difference nila. Nominal is category or ordinal is ranking. Okay? Magra-rank tayo. Bibigyan mo siya ng assessment or evaluation. That's the difference between the two. Okay? Pag-rate din ng events. So example, nag-intramurals kayo after the celebration ng intramurals, the SSC might give you an evaluation form. They want to know how you see or paano mo i-rate yung nangyari na activity. Na merong mga assessment points there when it comes to example the time, the activities mismo, kung nalipay ba ka or wala. As long as nagbibigay ka ng ranking class, whether it is 1 to 100 or 1 to 5 lang, basta may ranking, automatic, ordinal scale, yun siya. Pag nominal, categories lang. Okay? Na yung talagang isipin niyo sa nominal is, like, I belong here. When it comes to sex, I belong here sa female. When it comes to the marital status, I belong here sa mga single. Kapag ka ganun, mga categories or classification, nominal yan siya. When it comes to socio-economic status, siguro nasa average. Okay? So I don't care whether sa kadako imuhang incomes in terms of the numerical value, but since I am talking about the category, dito ako na-belong sa average. Nominal yan siya. Okay? Or kung tatanungin ka, year level mo, kayo, mga second year kayo. So, wala tayong numerical value. Though sa tingin ninyo second, the 2 there is a numerical value, but that is actually a category. So, sa pharmacy, you belong sa mga second year. So, yun yung nominal. So, I hope nagkasinabutaan na nominal and ordinal. Feeling na ko kay gitudlo niya siya sa inyo hatong senior high mo. Kaya lang nakalimot na siguro. Or absent mo na. or absent mo atong mga panahon na ang uban nangihi siguro mo na ang uban nakalimot na. Ang pangutanon, what is a nominal scale in statistics or what is an ordinal scale in statistics. But anyway, at least we have our review para sa research pagpangutanon mo ni Dean. What is the type of data that you will be collecting? Kabalo mo sa inyong itubag. So si Dean is kasama siya sa ating panelist sa research. Pag mag-defense na. Nag-recess mo ato. Wala pa yung recess na una-una pa mo. Nag-istorya pa ganin yung teacher of nominal o ordinal, nag-recess na mo. Una-una mo nang nakalimot guro ang uban. Pero any questions so far sa nominal o sa ordinal? Ang pananghit nag-CR na abot na og canteen sa mukha. Sa mukha. Sa UIC na, since diba I graduated sa UIC sa Davao. Sa UIC lisod kayo mananghit anang mag-CR lang ba niya, nag-recess na, dili na niyo siya mahimo sa UIC kay ngano ang pharma sa UIC nasa 5th floor. Wala kay laing makitang masagol din ha sa 5th floor. Mga pharma lang na tanan rooms din ha nag-occupy pharmacy students. Tapos ang canteen sa UIC nasa ground floor. Kunya sa among time wala pay elevator. Kabalaan jud ko naguna-una naka-og recess kay dugay kay kakabalik. Either nalibang ka or either nag-recess na ka kung nananghid ka mag-CR, ya dugay ka nimbalik. Pero sa doctors, pwede ra kayo mabot ng canteen. Okay, walay question, nominal and ordinal. Naguna-una nagpaluto og pansit canton. O yun ay sikat sa canteen sa unang bayaran kay magpaluto og pansit canton. Hinahinay mo sa inyong MSG. Sa inyong MSG ha. Okay, so we have now the third one, the interval scale. Take note, values are continuous, meaning these are product of measurements. We can also do counting here, pero most of the time, measurements talaga. And they are real numbers. Again, they are real numbers when it comes to the interval scale. So, tinatawag siyang interval scale because there is a certain interval. So, example, mag-measure ka 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. May interval sila na 1 kada measurement. Okay? Pero, most of our values, when we do experimentation, interval scale talaga sila. So, this includes, again, numerical values that are generated when we do investigation or laboratory experiments. Now, what do you need to know about interval scale? Wala talaga siyang true 0 point. So, pag sinabi mo kasing true 0 point, pag sinabi kasing 0, as in wala talaga yon. Pero minsan kasi sa measurement, like sa temperature, degrees Celsius. So, di ba pag sinabing 0 degrees Celsius, hindi ibig sabihin nun, wala siyang temperature. I hope you get it. Again, ang interval scale, wala talaga siyang true 0 point. Kasi pag sinabing 0, wala talaga. Now, may mga measurements tayo, kagaya ng bago ko lang sinabi, temperature, 0 degrees Celsius. Diba pag sinabing 0 degrees Celsius, yun yung temperature niya, pero it doesn't mean wala siyang temperature. Okay, I hope you get that. So what are the examples of the interval scale? We have here the weight, the length, the timings, the concentrations, the pressure, even the volume, the mass, okay, or the size. Anything that we measure in the laboratory are actually under the interval scale. Now, another example, when we do like testing sa IQ of example, the student, and then, diba, hindi ko kahinumdum kung nakatest sa IQ, but, diba, ano lang ito, parang exam, so you will have your scores afterwards. Now, in this case, an IQ test, mag-yield siya ng score from 0 to 200. Pero, bakit naging interval scale yung IQ testing? Kasi, Pag 0 ang score mo sa IQ, it doesn't mean wala kang intelligence. Nakuha. Pag may kag 0, wala. Ganyan siya, di ba? Pero kung ang imuhang score kay 0, it means 0 lang imong score. Pero wala na siya nagpasabot na grabe, wala na yun kay intelligence. And at the same time, yung score na 200 does not mean na grabe na yun yung intelligence, ultimate na yun, as in pinakataas. No, kasi ang exam natin sa IQ, ganun lang, 0 ang lowest, 200 ang highest. Pero wala siyang ibang meaning na wala ka na talaga intelligence. I hope that is clear for the interval scale. Kasi yan kasi yung difference nila ni ratio scale. Actually, kaya sabi ko kanina sa mga statistical platform, you cannot really see them separately. Parehas isang scale sila, dinudugtong sila interval/ratio scale. Kasi parehas kasi silang real numbers, product of measurement or counting. The only difference is that the ratio scale has a meaningful true 0 point. Pag sinabi niyang 0, wala talaga yon, as in 0. For example, distance, pag the distance is 0, meaning wala talagang distance yon. Well, when it comes to the interval scale, merong mga measurements or data na kahit 0 yung nakuha mo, hindi siya nagsistate na wala ka talaga nung attribute or property na mini-measure na yon. Kagaya ng intelligence kanina. So, nag-overlap kasi si ratio and si interval scale class. Kagaya ni height, ni weight, ni time, na-mention ito kanina sa interval scale. But they can also be called ratio scale because kung ang height mo ay 0, grabe. Pero wala man siya height na 0. Kung ang height mo ay 0, wala ka talagang height. Yan ang ibig sabihin, no? True 0 point. Or kung ang weight, grabe. Kung ang weight mo ay 0, 0 talaga or the time. Pero pwede din natin siya again tawagin as interval scale. So, isa lang yan sila actually. Okay? Questions about our level of measurement or types of data sa research? Wala. So, ako ang mangutana. So, for example, yung study kanina, blood glucose level. Pag nag-measure ka ng blood glucose level ng iyong patient, anong type of data kaya yon? You can send your answer sa chat. Anyway, this is being recorded. Pag human-ani, mapasa ni sa kuatanan inyong chat, and I'll have a record of your participation. Sulod dito sa akong laptop. Again, blood glucose level. Anong scale kaya si blood glucose? Let's wait for the others. Okay, very good. Blood glucose level is a ratio scale kasi pag mingon kag blood glucose, true number na siya, real number. Nakatry na mo mag-measure of blood glucose kanang sa glucometer, di ba? Pag human, pagbutang nimo sa dugo, maghatag siya og number. That's a true number, a real number. And at the same time, we have a meaningful true 0 point here. Pag 0 ang nakalagay, meaning wala ka talagang glucose. Grabe, napatay na ka ito kung wala dyan glucose ang imuhang blood. So that's the meaning of the ratio scale. Pero actually, I will also accept interval scale. Kasi nag-overlap silang dalawa and pinagdudugtong kasi sila actually. Okay? So again, ratio or interval si blood glucose level. So another example, perception of the patients when it comes to branded and generic drug. Tapos yung pagkuha ng perception is using a questionnaire with a Likert scale. Wait lang, isulat ko ha. Likert scale, ang nasa questionnaire. Meaning yan, yung may pagpipilian ka na 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, na yung 5 is moderate, 5 5 is strongly agree, 1 is strongly disagree. Likert scale ang tawag ana ha, basi para dili ninyo makalimtan. Okay, very good. This one is ordinal. Ordinal tayo. Meron tayong numerical values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we are concerned about the rankings here. Ranking, di ba, kapag may 5, yes, I strongly agree. Pero kung wala kay ko na, agree ko, pero dili kaayo, so sige, 4. Naay ranking. So do not forget, ano yan siya, ordinal scale pag merong ranking. Okay? Now, pag ang question is, saang barangay ako nabilong? Example, nandoon sa questionnaire, barangay. So, nilagay ko doon, barangay Labangal. What type of data is that? Okay, very good. That is nominal. Okay, nominal ha kasi wala tayong numerical value. Instead, categories. Very good. Or classification. Ako Labangal, kung kamo Lagaw, San Isidro, kung asa man mga barangay, categories ang tawag dyan. I hope dili na siya malibog ha. Depende man na siya sa pangutana sa research. So, ang inyong isipon yun, pag walay number, ang ako ang itubag sa inyo is category nominal diretso. Pag merong numbers, pero isipin nyo muna, is that number a representation only of a rank? Anong 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ranking lang, or ordinal na siya. For example, pain. Nakatry na mo magpa-doktor, tapos pangutanon dayon mo kanang parate sa inyo ha ang pain from 1 to 10 unsa daw kasakit inyong na feel. So sa tanong ninyo, sakit jud kaayon, ya imong rating kay 10. Ang ang scale ana is ordinal kasi ranking yun 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hangtod 10. So these are not actually real numbers. Ano lang sila? Representation of a ranking. So kay ang pain manggod, subjective manggod na ang pain. So always give na siya, do not forget, pain is subjective. The pain na imuhang na feel might not be the same with the other person. Kasi kanya-kanya tayo ng pain threshold or pain tolerance. Meron kasing iba, like maliit na sugat, tapos grabe nagid kayo to kasakit para sa ilaha. Kunya, for example, para sa kuha, dili dito siya kayo sakit. So ayun ninyo sila i-judge na okay ha, kay subjective dyan ang pain. So depende, nasakitan siya pag maayo. So magbuot din mo kung nasakitan siya pag maayo. Okay, so that is, again, ordinal. Now, for true or real numbers, class, we only have interval or ratio scale. The only difference is ratio has a meaningful true 0 point na pag sinabi niyang 0, 0 talaga yun. Okay, 0 talaga siya. Questions so far? Wala. Kasi nabutan na ha. Okay, let's talk about population and sample. So, oras na. Sigmalamian kong istorya. Maulang gibayan niya akong klase karon. Pag ipamata lang kong sa iyo, 7:30 hangtod 10:30. Kaya pagkahuman, wala na ko'y klase. Balik na kong tulog. Kasi malamian ko. Malamian kong istorya. Population and sample class. When you say population, it's the entire group of people or entire group of object wherein you want to study either their behavior, their properties, or yung mga unique patterns nila. So for example, my target is the BS Pharmacy students. So lahat ng nabilong doon sa BS Pharmacy, population yon. Yun ang tawag. Lahat-lahat sila, population. Now, the sample is just a portion of the population. meaning we will just get representatives. Sa research, we do sampling. Hindi ka masyadong makakakita ng research na nag-conduct ng study sa whole population kasi mahirap yun. Hindi yun siya practical. Matagal ka matapos just to reach all the members of the population, and at the same time, it will be costly. Costly pud na siya kung tanan na lang yun imuhang i-appeal sa imuhang research. Kung example, magkanda ka og survey sa tanang BS Pharmacy students. Example, 500 na sila kabuok. Pag moingon ka og population, silang lahat 500 will be included in your study. So by hook and by crook, kailangan mo silang ma-achieve lahat. Kailangan mo silang mapasagot lahat sa research mo. Okay? Pero again, sa research, mas ginagawa natin yung pagkuha ng sample. So a sample is again a portion, just a little portion of the population, and it will become the representative. So itong sample na ito will have the qualities, will have the properties or behavior of the population that you are studying. Again, that is what you call a sample. So what are the steps to determine the sample size ng iyong study? Kasi sabi ko kanina, we don't really do population testing. We just do sample testing. So ang question ngayon, paano natin malalaman yung sample size? Kung 500 yung pharmacy students, gaano karami yung ating magiging sample? So these are again the steps. We have determine the population where the data you need can be gathered. That's the first step in research. You really have to define your population first. Kinsa ba imong gusto, kinsa ba nimo i-conduct imong survey? Pharmacy students or the whole GSDMSFI na mga students? Or gusto nimo residents of General Santos City? If you have determined that, then that's the step 1. And then after that, determine the kind of sample to be drawn from it or to be selected from the identified population. So gikan sa population, ano lang talaga yung gusto mong i-target? Babae lang ba lahat? Lalaki lang ba lahat? Or pwedeng halo-halo na? Bata lang ba? Matanda? Or anything else? Kung ano yung gusto mo talagang target mo na ipasali sa research mo. Pag nakuha mo na yon, you have to determine now the sample size. So in research class, I hope wala na magkakamali nito kasi ito yung parati question ni Dean kung ano yung sample size ninyo and how did you get your sample size. So you have to answer her or the other panelists that you use either the Slovene's formula and then the other formula or the other way that I will teach you later. So again, the first one is the Slovene's formula. We have the formula N. Small letter n is equal to capital letter N divided by 1 plus n times e squared. Okay? So the small letter n there is the sample size. The capital letter N is the population. And E is the estimated margin of error or the acceptable error. In research class, we really do have a room for error, especially if we are just doing sampling. Magsasample lang tayo. Since hindi lahat ng members ng population sa studyhan natin, may error talaga yon. So, most likely, yung binibigay natin na room for error is 5%. So, that is 0.05. And that the remaining 95% will be our confidence level. Meaning, we are confident that 95% of the sample that we can get is magbibigay sa atin ng correct na data. Okay? Sige, let's try. Let's have an example. Hindi ko sure kung pila mo kabuok pharma. Pero example lang ito. Example, gusto ninyo mabalaan ang IQ level sa mga pharmacy students. So, ang pharmacy students sa school, example, 150. And then again, we don't do population sampling. We will just do population testing, we will just do sample testing. So magko-compute tayo class N is equal to, capital letter N is the population. So this is the population here, 150 divided by 1 plus capital letter N again. So that is still 150. And then the E squared is the room for error or the acceptable error, which is 5%. So we will use the decimal 0.05 and then do not forget na is-square mo yan. Ang problema wala ko calculator. Please get your calculator and help me with this. So sige, we have 150 over 1 plus 150. 0.05 squared. Mag-cellphone na lang po ha. The answer si Nicole, pas-pas away. Wait lang. Step by step na to. So this is 0.0025. Then step by step, 150 divided by 1 plus 150 times 0.0025. This is 0.375. So this is 150 divided by 1.375. So N now is 150 divided by 1.375. The answer is 109. The answer is 109. Okay, again, the answer is 109. So as you can see in your answers there, actually decimal na 109.09, pwede po 109.10. Pero man God, remember that dili man ka maka-survey o 0.09 nga tao. So always remember that you really have to round it off to the nearest whole number. So alangan pa, example, maghatag kag questionnaire sa tanang pharmacy students, tapos 109.09. Paano man ito nimo kwaon ang 0.09 na tao? So dili nato na siya kaya. So whole number lang gid siya perme. So pag mag-quiz ko or kung mag-research na mo pohon, I hope I cannot see a decimal there in your answer. Because again, we cannot do survey or we can't do even experimentation with a decimal na person. Okay, 109. So that's how you get the sample. So kung magkuha na ka og IQ level plus or mag-conduct na ka og research, instead of doing the population testing na 150, since sampling testing lang tayo, 109 lang. 109 lang katao, imuhang pilion to be included in your research. So, hindi siya masyadong marami na, and at the same time, magiging representative sila ng iyong population. Di ka rin mahihirapan kasi I don't know if you have experience conducting a survey, meron talagang hindi sasagot dyan. Mag-unya-unya lang tapos di kalimtan na dito. Kaya dili gid sila gusto mag-answer, magdili. So dili ka mabitin sa imuhang research kaya hindi ka man nag-population testing. Sample testing lang naman ito. Questions about the Slovene's formula? Or you want to clarify sa formula na to? Wala? So we have here another example. A researcher may want to determine the reading deficiencies of the students in his school. However, he may not probably be able to test all the students on account of their big numbers with 5,000 population. Let us estimate the sample size using 5% acceptable margin of error. So this is a problem solving, and you may use the Slovene's formula here to identify the sample size na kukunin ng researcher pag mag-conduct na siya ng survey. So the population daw is 5,000 and the acceptable margin of error is 5%. Ito yung acceptable talaga, most of the time 5%. Meron ding 1%, pero the 1% is more on the clinical trials, especially if drug ang atong istoryahan and then ihatag na siya sa human subject. Because we are very strict when it comes to kanang investigation using human subject. We are talking about life. So ang room for error natin is very strict, 1% lang. Pero pag mga survey lang ang gagawin, yan, allowed ang 5% na error. Pero sa mga problem solving, pag isa-state naman kung ilan yung acceptable margin of error, pag hindi estimate class sa problem, automatic 5% siya, 5% automatic. So the same thing na gagawin natin, the same formula, oops, baliktad. Wait lang. This is n here. 1 plus n e squared. Can you try to solve this? Pila kaya ang sample size ani nga study? Okay, let us check kung tama na inyong gisend. Diba 5,000 sa taas? Kindly check. I recheck your answers. Kung asa dapit ang mali. 5,000 sa baba 1 plus, remember this is 5,000 times e squared, 5% is equivalent to 0.05, right? And then this should be squared. Pwede na lang, kaya wala na po space. 5,000 over 1 plus 5,000. This is 0.0025. So, isoda wala yun. Wait lang. 5,000 times 0.025 is 125. 1 plus 125. So this is 5,000 divided by 126. Round. Oh, sorry. Did I miss something? Wait lang na. Dito na ko. Basig. Ito para ko. So, dami cellphone na. Times 5,000. This is 12.5. Let me check this one. So this is 13.5. 5,000 divided by 13.5, round it off to the nearest whole number. So the population or the sample size for this study should be 370. So yes, your answers are correct, 370. So I hope you see the difference. The 5,000 na population is a very big number and it will be impractical to do research sa tanang 5,000. So through computing the sample size, the researcher will just have to conduct the survey to 370 people. Okay, so hindi na siya masyadong mahihirapan. And since 370 persons will be coming from the population itself, so they will now become a representative. They possess also the attribute or the characteristic of the population. May room of error lang tayo na 5%. But nevertheless, mas konti siya. Hindi mahihirapan ang researcher. So that's what you call computation of the sampling size. And then I will teach you another one. This time, you will not be computing manually, we have actually a software na pwede niyong gamitin to know the sample size. So, balik kayo sa Google and then paki-search Rawsoft. Rawsoft calculator. Ayan. Lagay na lang sa Google, Rawsoft calculator. And then, makikita nyo dyan www.rawsoft.com. And then, just click it. And then this one is the application. This is also acceptable in research. You just have to state in your paper whether you use the Slovene's formula or you use the Rawsoft na software. Okay? Kailangan lang i-state ano talaga ang ginamit ninyo. Almost the same yung numbers. Meron lang konting difference. Pero both are accepted. Slovene's formula and this Rawsoft. So parehas pa rin, may margin of error siya dyan. Pag sinabi ng problem na 5%, so automatic na yan 5%, papalitan mo lang yan kung 1% ang sinabi. Pero 5% and then ito, syempre automatic 95%. And ito yung part na babaguhin natin. We will be writing here what is the population size. So yung previous natin na problem, sabi ang population size ay 5,000. Again, 5,000 ang population size. Wag nyo nang ibahin itong what is the response distribution. 50% talaga yan siya para 50% ang pantay ang pag-calculate. Walang mga anong tawag dyan, hindi magiging skewed ang ating data. Normally distributed sila, so 50%. And as you can see, as you place the population size, automatic sa baba, magbibigay siya ng recommended na sample size. So kung nakita ninyo, the answer is 357. So automatic, siya na yung mag-compute. And almost the same, 370 if it is through the use of Slovene's formula, and it is 357 if Rawsoft. So again, both are accepted. You just have to indicate in your paper what type of calculation did you use, or kung nagamit yung software, so lagay nyo Rawsoft. Okay? Questions? Madali lang ito, wala na kayong kailangang i-compute here. Diretso na sa Google, search Rawsoft, and then ito lang talaga ang babaguhin natin, the population size. So yung previous pa talaga, yung sa pharmacy students, example, 150. So we have here 109. Pila ganito itong na-compute sa Slovene's formula? I cannot remember. Ito, 109 po ito, no? Sa Slovene's formula. Tama ba? 109 din. Okay, sige. So parehas sila with the Slovene's formula. It's 109. Okay? So sa quizzes and sa exam, I will really have an instruction. Kung meron ka akong problem solving, nakalagay talaga yan sa instruction whether you use Slovene's or you use the Rawsoft in computing the sample size. Okay? So I think I will just end here. Any question? It's 10:27.